Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation, Studying the Impact of the COVID-19 Pandemic on the Behavioral Plasticity of Adolescents, and we're from the Janaki group.
So the cognitive dissonance theory states that when one's attitude conflicts with their behavior, a discomfort arises in the brain, and this is known as cognitive dissonance. So the goal of our study is to collect information on the dissonance that high school students have experienced over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, and to truly understand the correlation between the effect of the pandemic and dissonant feelings teenagers have recently experienced. We hypothesized that new and constantly changing legislation concerning vaccines, masks, public safety, and school regulations have led to students experiencing cognitive dissonance.
So, like Maddy said, cognitive dissonance occurs when someone's behavior is inconsistent with their beliefs. This can often cause tension and discomfort in the individual. The concept of cognitive dissonance theory was invented by Leon Festinger, who was a social psychologist who developed the theory in 1957. He came up with the idea that the people who face this dissonance have an internal burden to resolve the discomfort, and they can accomplish this by either shifting their attitude or their behavior. There are many classic examples of dissonance that can be observed in real life. For example, an individual who enjoys eating unhealthy food but also wants to eat healthier is faced with dissonance because they know that the junk food is unhealthy but they still eat it. Another example is someone who smokes cigarettes. The smoker knows that there could potentially be severe negative consequences that could arise from smoking, but they still do it anyway. And as you can see in the image below, the basic concept is that there's a difference between fact and belief.
So the question our research aims to answer is, how does the COVID-19 pandemic affect the behavioral plasticity of adolescents? So our dissonance questionnaire, this is a scoring method. The participants must rate how much they agree with a question or a statement that's given using a scale from 1 to 10. A 1 corresponds to strongly disagreeing with the statement, a 5 corresponding to neutral, a 10 corresponding to strongly agree, and all the other numbers in between those. The questions measure internal belief against external behaviors, thereby measuring dissonance. The questions are split into 5 COVID-19 associated categories: general, vaccines, masks, government and authority, and school. The custom scale is used to measure the extent of behavior plasticity in the individuals with levels of insignificant or low dissonance, neutral dissonance, or significant and high dissonance. For numerical values, a below a 4.5 average is significant, 4.5 is neutral, and above a 4.5 is insignificant.
All right, so with this data that we collected, we use R to do our data analysis. And in R, we tested the correlation of individual scores in each of the 5 groups that we labeled against each other. So we also used ggplot and ggplot2 to make our scatter plots. And some of the tests that we ran were the p-test, t-test, and ANOVA, which is also known as the R-value test. And some plots that we created were regression maps, heat maps, and scatter plots. So as you can see down at the bottom, we have a couple of tests that we ran. In the first table, you can see the correlation of scores in different groups. And with 5 groups in total, we had 11 total possible combinations for these correlations. And the data below that shows that there was little to no correlation between variables in the different groups, as well as our R values were extremely low for our data. So with the highest one being 0.42. And for context, our R value of 1, which of the data is exactly the same in both groups. So now we'll get into the results more and thirdly discuss our analysis.
Okay, so now on to results. Our results from around 50 study participants indicated that our questionnaire can precisely measure the adolescents' responses via our design scoring system. So we found that there is no correlation in the dissonance scores of the 5 different question groups in the questionnaire. So for example, if we map group 1 against group 2, there's going to be no correlation between the average scores of those groups. Participants experience highest dissonance on average in question group 4 regarding government/authority and COVID-19, and so this score was 3.14. Participants experience lowest dissonance on average in the question group 2 vaccines, and this average score was 4.97. Groups 2 and 3, however, had positive correlation with the total dissonance score on average. So now we're going to show a couple graphs that visualize this data. So the first graph shows that no correlation was found between question group 1, which was general COVID-19 questions, and question group 2, which regarded vaccines, and we saw a similar trend mapping any group against another group. The second graph shows group 2 on vaccines versus overall dissonance score. So the score from group 2 is on the bottom and the overall dissonance score is on the y-axis, and you can see a positive correlation between these two with an R value of around 0.68. So this shows that the higher the score for group 2, the higher the overall dissonance score tends to be. Finally, the third graph at the bottom is a box plot showing the distribution of scores in the general question section according to gender. So we calculated the total average scores by adding the average score of the 5 groups together by gender. So for example, a score of 22.5, which is 4.5 by 5, would be completely neutral. The average male score was 19.49, and the average female score was 20.14. The average prefer not to say score, which was calculated off one data point, was 19.31. And according to this data, we can conclude that males were slightly more dissonant than females.
Overall, this semester, our team has focused its efforts on the process of data collection from ASDRP students and outside sources, analyzing preliminary results, and presenting our study at an ASDRP colloquium. We are now using R to perform statistical analysis on about 50 data points that we've collected. We're also planning to write a research paper discussing our study and its results and submit it to an accredited journal and/or present it at a conference.
In terms of future work, we will be continuing our statistical analysis, focusing particularly on the ANOVA test, and formally ending our data collection in September. As part of our analysis, we will also be reviewing individual vaccination status against our question subgroups. Once we've completed our data analysis, we will write a research paper on our study and submit our paper to social psychology journals for publishing. We also hope to present our study at upcoming conferences such as the prestigious SFN conference.
We would like to thank our advisor, Ms. Janaki, for her invaluable support during this project. We'd also like to thank ASDRP for making this work possible. We could not have done it without you. Thank you.